Latch the windows, lock the doors, and put the kids to bed. It's time for another episode of
Tales from the Garage!
Okay, I'm back once again. Well, I hope you'll indulge me for all my videos that I'm posting, my music, quote-unquote music videos from the Halloween music channel on cable TV. I promise, when Halloween ends, I won't be doing that anymore. But for me, this is my season. This is my favorite time of year. Love Halloween. Favorite holiday, if you want to call it a holiday. And I wait for that music choice channel on the cable TV to come on every year in early October. And it goes only until November 1st. But I actually save them on my DVR, so I've got quite a few hours. I got 40, 50, maybe more hours now of that music saved even from last year and the year before, for that brief 3-week period that they broadcast the Halloween music. So I have it to play all year round. But I won't torture my viewers with adding a song as much as I'd love to. Every single video I make, I'd love to copy a song, take my little iPad, and like I'm just holding it up to the TV, because that's the only way that I can get the video in here. And I'd love to do a song every single video I do from that Halloween channel, but I'm not going to subject people to that, except for this month. Who knows? Maybe next year I'll start earlier in September. Taking the previous year's Halloween channel music. But I try to keep it short. A lot of those are only about 3 minutes long. Those little pieces. I personally choose favorite pieces of mine that they play. They play a lot of vocal tunes as well. Some silly ones, some fun ones. I might put one of them up instead of the instrumental music at some point. I'm not sure. You can vote on it. Anybody that watches that knows I'm going to subject you to sticking one of those videos up, those songs at the beginning of my video. If you want me to stick with the instrumental stuff, let me know. If you want me to go a more silly, fun route, where I might put up something like I don't know, like the Purple People Eater, or even funny songs. They have some old songs by like Louis Armstrong doing a voodoo song or haunting song. They have a really funny Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross, if you know that singing trio from the 50s, early 60s. They did a real funny Halloween vocal thing. And I could also go the route of sound effects, because they also play some Halloween sound effects like demonic laughter and howls in the wind and things like that. So if you are so inclined to vote and you have maybe a preference what you want to see, and you want to leave me a little comment saying so, feel free to do that. Of course, you could always skip over them too. But I'm here mostly because Halloween comes and goes so fast. I can remember even before August counting down. I can remember, I think it was July, thinking, it's only really 3 months till Halloween. And definitely thinking about it in August, as hot as it is in August. It's been unbelievably warm here. And let's see, yesterday, which was Wednesday, I did go out to my sister's house to do my typical laundry thing, and it was in the 70s, and I was sweating. And that was early in the morning. That wasn't even at the peak of the heat in the afternoon. I left my house at about 9 a.m. and I went and did the laundry, and it was pretty damn warm out. It was in the 70s. Now today, I happened to go to my municipal town hall to pay my property taxes, my quarterly property taxes, and with the few dollars that I have left. And this is the first day that I went out. I'm not going to say it's the first day that it was cool and autumn-like, because a lot of days I don't go out at all. Sometimes I might go out once a week, and that's to do laundry, and that's it. But today was the first day I went out, and it was relatively early in the morning too. It was about 8:30. I went out and I paid my taxes at the town hall a few miles away, and it was so cool. I was actually thrilled and happy about this. It was so cool I had to put on my sweatshirt. Oh, I loved it. Loved it. And I had my bedroom window cracked open a little bit, and it was actually getting cold in there, which has not happened yet. Even though we've had cool days, when I had the bedroom window open, it might cool things off a little bit, but it was never cold like I felt cold. So that was nice. That was real nice. It's going to shoot up to about 80 at some point within the next 5 days or so, again, which I'm not digging, because I am a Halloween fan and I am an autumn fan. And I've talked about this before, and there's a lot of people that can relate to this, but my music listening, without intentionally trying, tends to be very seasonal. And this went on for years before I consciously really noticed it. I noticed in the summertime that I would be listening to the Yellow Jackets, the jazz group The Yellow Jackets, a lot, and just all of their music, not even a specific album or a specific period. And I would always get in the mood to listen to them in the summertime. And I mean, throughout all their history, from the early 80s up until whatever current stuff I have. And certain Wes Montgomery albums, for some reason, always in a specific period of his. I would always play them in the summertime. And it was years before I really consciously realized that I was doing that. And I don't know if spring might be the one that it's not quite as much, because I seem to transition from my winter listening, which is, I have very strong and very specific albums also that I listen to in winter and in autumn. And the winter stuff usually lasts for quite a while. And as soon as the weather gets warm, I don't really know that I have specific spring albums as much as when the weather gets warm, I start pulling out my summertime stuff. So I don't know if spring is so much the one season that I have real heavy specific albums that I listen to. I know certain people experience that, and I guess some people don't. Certainly, if you're going to experience it, it's the music fanatics that do. And I showed in my prior videos, my last couple of videos, the albums that I always play in autumn time. I guess in a way I have two not so separate things. I have Halloween albums that I listen to for the season, and I have autumn albums. But I have to admit, because I'm such a fan of Halloween, it's not like once Halloween's over, November 1st starts, I hang up those Halloween albums. Because I don't. Not only do I like the idea of extending the holiday as much as possible, but I just end up still having that desire to listen to those albums that I've been listening to for the Halloween season. And a lot of them are, as I showed, classical albums. They're classical music albums, and a lot of the pieces may have the titles or the composer's inspiration, might be some Russian poem that was about a witch or something like that. And other pieces might be there because they're ominous sounding, and maybe years after their creation, somebody started using them in movies because they were good, moody music soundtrack type things, and then they started, because of the movies they were in, getting associated with Halloween. But I really love those, especially those classical compilation albums that are packaged together for Halloween, all these various tracks from wherever. And the film music ones, the soundtrack things that are specifically made for the movies. There's a whole bunch of compilations and even cover versions of things like Tubular Bells, and even the John Carpenter stuff, there's been cover versions of that. Those things I find I'm still listening to when Halloween's over. And maybe there's some albums, and I cautiously really can't think of what they are right now. So as the season goes on and Halloween ends, maybe I'll get into that a bit more. But I do listen to those Halloween albums much after the holiday. Well into deep autumn, into early winter. I'm still listening to them in a lot of cases. And when I think of autumn albums that are not Halloween associated, I'm not coming up with any right now. So that's something that I'm going to have to, get together, and that'll be for a later video after all of Halloween's over. And my main reason for coming here today is because I like the season so much, and because I want to do a whole bunch of Halloween-themed videos as much as possible by the time the holiday technically ends, even though I'm celebrating it into November. People probably don't want to hear about it after November. So I'm going to make sure that I'm doing, regular videos and talking about anything Halloween-y that I can think of. And because I don't have a lot of stuff to talk about today, this is going to be a gift to you all. It's going to be less than my normal 14-hour-long video. Now, when it comes to my Halloween listening, getting back to the subject, it takes a lot for me to add. I showed you all those albums that I listened to, and it's quite a big batch. But when you think of the fact that I'm unemployed, and so I'm home all the time, so I always have music playing. But also, even when I was working, at least when I was working in an office, I always had tons and tons of I would bring MP3 discs in and copy them to my computer. So I had, dozens and dozens and dozens of albums in my computer at work in MP3 format. So I would play music at my desk all day as well. So even when I was working, I would have music playing all day at work. I would come home and I'd put the music on. So even though all those records that I showed that I play at Halloween seem like a lot of albums, they're really not, because I've got music going pretty much all the time. So, it might only take me, 2 days, 3 days tops back to back to actually play all of those albums through once, and they all get multiple spins. But I don't I don't go out of my way to attempt to add to force it to add more albums to my Halloween list. And by the way, I'm recording this very late at night. Sleeping a lot during the day. I can't. If I fall asleep at night, I fall asleep for like an hour and a half at a time, then I'm wide awake. So I come out to the garage with my neighbors probably sleeping above me. I don't know. And that's why I'm not being too loud. I don't have the music up too loud or anything. I come here at night and it's much more moody. It's much more moody. I don't know if I've done any Tales from the Garage really during the daytime. I may have. I know I've come out here with the intent of doing some during the day, and even when I do them in the other parts of my house, there's not the same vibe. There's something that is, I guess, the stillness of the late evening makes it easier to feel the vibe or to concentrate on what you're doing. I'm not sure what it is. But to get back to my point, I don't attempt every year to force new albums to join my annual playlist of Halloween albums. I pretty much just let it happen naturally. And I've had, many years when I haven't added any new albums to the Halloween playlist. I've got enough to keep me happy, and I do listen to all of those discs I showed multiple times, including the ghost story things, the narrated stories and tales. And every once in a while, things just get added on simply because I've gotten in the mood to play an album that really had no association or affiliation with Halloween, and simply because I played it around Halloween, something clicked. And the next year, I ended up getting a strong desire right in the Halloween season to play them again. And the perfect example that I already spoke about was the Tangerine Dream Green Desert album. And the imagery of a green desert being dry and hot is the total opposite of the cool weather that in this part of the country certainly I associate with Halloween. The days getting shorter, getting darker earlier, the leaves changing, the cool, crisp air. But simply because I had played that Green Desert album so many times one year, about maybe a dozen years ago, right at Halloween time, I just got in the mood, even though I'd had it for years, and I was playing it every night for, a week and a half or whatever it was. And I noticed that the next year, without even attempting to, when Halloween came around, I suddenly got in the mood to hear it again. And then it just was one of those things that kind of snuck into my playlist. So in a lot of cases, there are albums that I've had around for a long time that I maybe haven't listened to for a while, or simply because I suddenly get the desire to play them in the Halloween season, or any season. It could happen in the wintertime when I pull out and play some album I haven't listened to for a while, even though I know it well. And if I really get into it, I'll play it several days in a row maybe. And next thing I know, when the following year comes by in winter, maybe it's like I get that vibe again and I want to play it again. Therefore, it ends up falling on my quote-unquote seasonal playlist. So, Carm, our buddy Carm Gorvo, was talking recently along the same idea and the same subject, and how some albums of his that he's listened to for years, he kind of thought were very apropos for the Halloween season. And they're albums that I know and I have had for years, and even in multiple formats, and I love very well. And they never specifically got into my Halloween playlist. But he had to mention them. And now when he mentioned them, and I was thinking about them, I was like, wow, thinking of the music in them. And one of the first ones, Zeit by Tangerine Dream, the originally a 2-album set. I have a couple different CD versions of it. I don't have the latest one with the concert, but I have 2 CD versions. One, for some reason, is 2 discs, because the whole thing is about 75 minutes, and then which could fit onto 1 disc, and then I do have a 1-disc version. And this is actually my favorite album by Tangerine Dream, which by itself wouldn't be enough to make me throw it into the Halloween playlist. But since Carr mentioned it, and now I pulled it out to play it, it is rather dark music, as is Atem also, which was the album recorded, was it right before or right after this? I think it was right after. Atem's pretty dark too. But it struck me that, well, I've got it out to play and I've got it now loaded into my computer, there's a good chance that if I do play all of Zeit and I give it more than one full listen, that may end up next year being one of those things that mentally trigger, I want to hear Zeit again when the Halloween/autumn season comes around. And another one that he mentioned, which is most definitely really almost like a companion, a good companion piece to Zeit, because the music is also dark. It's by another German artist, and it's also one of his first albums. In this case, it is his first album, and that's Klaus Schultz Irrlicht. Very dark. One of my favorite albums. I pretty much put this in my top 2 Klaus Schultz albums, which naturally I have on CD. A couple times on CD now. And, there's no rhythm. It's very abstract. It's one of his most abstract albums. Only his first 2 albums were really abstract, but this is one of them. And now you see that picture, which is ice. Well, because of that, and because this is the first version that I had, I always associated the album kind of with winter anyway. But I know if I start playing this now, because of the music itself being so dark, I know that this is probably going to end up, and I like the tree branches in there too, this is probably going to end up on my, this is one that could easily end up on my Halloween annual playlist. And it's playing in the background right now. This is what's playing. And so while I was pulling out my Zeit disc so I could load it into my computer and listen to it, and perhaps get it stuck on my Halloween rotation, a couple other albums, which are favorites of mine, of Tangerine Dream, kind of came up. And I'm thinking, if I play these, just like Green Desert, if I play them now, this time of year, they may end up getting on my Halloween list. And that's Ricochet, which is again one of my favorite albums of theirs. Early album from about 1975. And I love that cover too. This could be a Halloween album. It's dark enough. It's dark enough. And even though I've listened to it zillions of times, I don't have yet a seasonally specific association with that album. And here's another one, which is a bit of an oddball Tangerine Dream album, because it's actually a compilation. And this is one on the Disky label, which is a people probably know it. It's a budget label out of the Netherlands. And I don't know if they put out any original albums as much as they license albums by artists, and then they make kind of compilations out of them. And this one is interesting because, well, I'll show it. It's an album without a title. It's just called Tangerine Dream. Now, this came out in 1996. And I bought it even though there's no rare material on here. There's no alternate versions or remixes or anything. And I bought it at a time when I had a disposable income of some type, not like now, So it's one of those things that I knew when I was buying it, and it was, I'm sure it was less than $10. I knew when I was buying it that it didn't have any rare or new material, but rather it's one of those things that when you're a fan of a band, you might buy a compilation just for the hell of it sometimes, and that's what I did. And Disky has done a couple of these. This was the first one, and they didn't title any of them, so the second one is also called Tangerine Dream, but it has later material from getting into the early 80s, which is not a period that I'm real fond of. This was the first one, though, and it's quite an odd collection. It's got the entire Phaedra album, all 4 tracks. Now, I noticed, and it runs about 65 minutes. I noticed, though, looking at the times, that it seems like they're shaving off a few seconds here and there from the tracks. So some of the tracks are 5 or 10 seconds shorter than the original album, up to like a half a minute shorter. So I don't know, I'd really have to do a side-by-side comparison. It could be sometimes they're just cutting out a bit of silence at the beginning or end of a track. But some of these with like a 30-second difference or even more, obviously something's getting cut out. They're doing, for whatever reason, I don't know, a premature fade out or something. I'm not sure why they would do that. They had enough time for all the tracks that they put on here to have the complete unedited versions. The whole thing only comes up, like the whole Phaedra album might be maybe a minute shorter than the original album, so it's kind of weird. So it has all 4 tracks from Phaedra, which was 73 if I'm not mistaken. And it has Rubicon Part 1, which is the full, like 17 and a quarter minute Rubicon Part 1. That is not edited at all, so it's the entire first half of Rubicon, because there's basically 2 17-minute long sides. And the mood of Rubicon fits well with Phaedra. This is not the darkest stuff they've done, but it's pretty dark. And I pulled this out and I loaded this into my computer, and listening to it, I was like, wow, this fits the Halloween season. And the last track on here is the title track, oddly enough, from Stratosphere, which was 75 or 76. I think it was recorded in the studio late 75, but I could be wrong. Came out in 76 maybe. That's a little more up-tempo, or like in terms of sequencer part being a little more up-tempo. Stratosphere is an album that I'm not in love with because I'll listen to it only from time to time. I don't listen to it as much as their other stuff. So it's interesting having a track, just one track, pulled from there, because I would probably hear it more on this compilation than I would by playing Stratosphere. Stratosphere was the album to me that after which I wasn't in love so much with the music that the band made. I'm not, even though Encore was the live album, was the first album I bought by them, I'm not a big fan of that album. I'm not a big fan of was it Thief? The Thief soundtrack? Or yeah. To me, their music started getting more concrete and less abstract, right at the point of Stratosphere. You hear Stratosphere has a lot less abstract stuff going on, a little bit more concrete, a little bit more maybe, I don't say compositional, but the rhythm, there's a rhythm there, whether it comes from a sequencer or whatever. Just a little more mainstream in terms of it would be easier to introduce somebody, if you're playing them the 70s music of Tangerine Dream, say, to have them hear Stratosphere than it would be Zeit or Rubicon or Phaedra or something like that, because that stuff's a little more out there. So even though the Stratosphere track isn't quite as atmospheric as the first side of Rubicon that's on here, or the Phaedra stuff, it kind of does fit well. They put it last. The sequencer's a little more up tempo, but I'm going to be listening to this. I'm going to play this tonight, and I know if it gets any more spins, within this next couple-week period before Halloween, this could also end up being a future Halloween spin. So, considering I had nothing to say, I've already gone on for almost a half hour. I'm just going to do a poll here, a vinyl poll. These are so tight, I can't get these out. Yikes. Oh, here's a weird one, and it's not an ECM again. And probably a lot of you have this. The Moon and the Melodies, ladies and gentlemen. This is probably the closest thing to a rock music thing that I'm going to probably pull out of there. The Moon and the Melodies. Harold Budd and the Cocteau Twins. They didn't use the Cocteau Twins' name, though, for some reason. But they used the names of the members of the Cocteau Twins. So it came out as Harold Budd, Elizabeth Fraser, Robin Guthrie, and Simon Raymond. I bought this because I was a Harold Budd fan. At the time this came out in the 80s, 86. I was already a Harold Budd fan. And I had heard of the Cocteau Twins. I had no idea what kind of music they did. I knew nothing about them. To me, they were a rock band. I had no interest in them. And there's 4 very short songs on here. And then there's 4 instrumental songs. 1 or 2 of them are short, but 2 of the instrumental songs are pretty long. So in terms of time, there's much more instrumental music going on than the vocal stuff. And it's kind of a weird album. It actually did get me interested, and I did go out and buy a bunch of Cocteau Twins stuff, though, after hearing this, because I thought they were interesting for a rock band. The 4 songs sound like they sound like a slightly darker version of only slightly, but they basically sound like 4 songs that could be on Cocteau Twins albums. Now that I've got a bunch of their albums, maybe a slightly darker edge to them, only slightly. But they have the drum machine, they have the drum pattern going. The guitar heavy sound and bass, and the vocals doing their normal thing that Elizabeth Fraser does. And they could have been pulled off of like an EP by them, or or stuck on an album even of their regular songs of the regular Cocteau Twins output. And it's a bit schizophrenic, and whenever I've listened to the album ever, I've always programmed the 4 vocal songs with the drum beats together and the 4 instrumentals separately, because the 4 instrumentals don't really have any drums. There's one short instrumental which has a slight drum beat in the background for all of maybe a minute, but it's mixed way back. And the other 3 instrumentals, which are much longer, are very dark, very much like Harold Budd. There's no voice in them. There's no drum machine. Even the guitar is even more processed than the standard typical Cocteau Twins song. So it kind of sounds like Harold Budd, and you don't really know. You probably couldn't pick out so much that was Robin Guthrie's guitar on there, because he's playing some solo like lead lines that are very heavily processed, not the kind of chordal things for the most part that he would normally do in the Cocteau Twins stuff. So I always have to program those separate because it's too schizophrenic an album otherwise. But I actually, I bought a bunch of Cocteau Twins albums, and yet the 4 vocal songs on here pretty much remained my favorite songs that they did. And on those songs, Harold Budd's just playing some supporting keyboards very much kind of in the background. You could kind of tell he probably didn't have anything to do with the writing of those. And it's the total flip side for the instrumentals. They sound like they're completely pretty much composed by Harold Budd, and Robin Guthrie's kind of playing along. Simon Raymond, the bass player, sometimes it sounds like he's not in the mix at all, because there's not a regular rhythm, that you would hear the standard kind of bass holding down a rhythm on. So the bass is maybe there, maybe not there a lot of the time. Instrumental tracks have no vocals of any type on, even in the background. And I do have to mention, there's a couple moments on here. There's a guy named Richard Thomas who plays the background drums in one of the instrumentals, it's like I said, it's just in there for about a minute. It's effective. But he also plays saxophone on 2 of the tracks. And I have to say, he's kind of undercredited here because he's the only guy not mentioned on the front cover. His saxophone playing on these 2 tracks actually makes those tracks. They're really nice. The saxophone's very, very effective on the 2 tracks that Richard Thomas appears on with the saxophone. It really, your attention just totally goes to what he's playing. It's not that it's involved or it's a wild solo or anything, but it just drips with atmosphere. Yeah, you know what? This could be a Halloween album. This could be a Halloween, even with the songs. The songs are dark. And it was my introduction to the Cocteau Twins. And I don't know, I might be the only guy that bought it being a Harold Budd fan that had never heard the Cocteau Twins before, when for most people buying it, they were Cocteau Twins fans and they had no idea who Harold Budd was. So it's an interesting pick because, you know, if I play this album now, this could easily be one of those things. I don't have a real seasonal association specifically with this album yet. I've played it off and on many times over the years, but I've never associated it as being a winter or summertime or autumn album. I play it now, it may end up getting into the Halloween batch, who knows. So the whole album's only 37 minutes. It's a pretty short album, which I've had on CD now for some time. But I bought this when it came out in '86. That's a bit weird. I'm surprised because in '86 I was buying compact discs, so I don't quite know why I bought this on album unless it didn't initially come out on compact disc at that time. I'm not sure. So that's it for my album pull. I had nothing to talk about, and look at me, I'm going on 34 minutes. Okay, I'll be back with more Halloween talk and Halloween music from the music channel that you probably don't want to see. And I hope everybody's doing well, and I'll be back fairly soon. Take care.
Tales from the Garage is brought to you by Monster Out. Just spray it once a day throughout your home and keeps all monsters away, even invisible ones. Say goodbye to ghoulies, goblins, gremlins, mummies, vampires, and the living dead. Not effective on witches, chicken men, or rhino girls. And by Smoky brand cigarettes. 9 out of 10 doctors recommend smoky cigarettes to their patients. Remember, gals love a smoky man. Smoky, the key to great taste. Tune in next time for more
Tales from the Garage.